Chris Christie is one of Trump's biggest critics, and I mean that literally. But it wasn't always this way, so let's go back to the early 2000s when Trump and Christie were actually friends. Their friendship began back in 2002 when Trump's sister, federal judge Marianne Trump Barry, introduced them over dinner. Christie would later write about that night in his memoir, describing Trump as opinionated, bombastic, and entertaining. For years, they stayed friendly, but behind the scenes, one thing stood in the way: Jared Kushner's father. In 2005, as U.S. attorney, Christie prosecuted Charles Kushner for tax evasion and witness tampering, something that Jared would never forget. Let's jump to the summer of 2015. The GOP race was heating up and Trump's campaign was already dominating headlines. Christie's friendship with Trump would be tested when he launched his first attack of the campaign, just 3 weeks before the first GOP debate. Christie was asked about Trump's comments on immigrants and his overall immigration plan. This was his response.
But did he send the wrong signal or not? Because you said you're going to be all about straight talk.
Well, this will be the 15th time I've answered it now.
So what's it?
It's inappropriate. The comments were inappropriate. But listen, Donald is a friend. I've known him for 13 years, and I like him personally. But his comments were inappropriate.
What's your stance on immigration?
Listen, a few things first. We know that we have to secure the border, and we have to do it in multiple ways, not by building a wall across the entire south border. I don't think that's realistic or effective.
The timing said it all. The first debate was around the corner, and Christie was already drawing a line in the sand between himself and Trump. Interestingly, Trump didn't respond to this, and even during the first GOP debate, Trump and Christie largely ignored each other. But that silence wouldn't last forever. A week after the debate, Christie took another sideline swipe, questioning Trump's temperament to be president.
You dare take a swipe at Trump? He doesn't seem to take the first swipe, but you take the first swipe at him, he's going to nuke you.
Well, listen, the bottom line is that this isn't about Donald Trump, it's about me. I've known him for 13 years, and Donald's a great guy and a good person, but I just don't think he's suited to be president of the United States.
Why?
I don't think his temperament is suited for that, and I don't think his experience is. He's got great experience in doing things in business, but I'll give you a perfect example. If he doesn't get what he wants from John Boehner, you can't fire him. You can't say, Mr. Speaker, you're fired.
Business Insider reached out to Trump's campaign for comment, and once again, nothing. Shortly before that, Christie sat down for an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper. He went after Trump's immigration plan again, saying,
"There are not enough law enforcement officers, local, county, state, and federal combined, to forcibly deport 11 to 12 million people. I mean, and this is like building a 2,000-mile wall across the border that Mexico's going to pay for."
This interview would come back up a month later when both men shared the stage again at the second GOP debate. During that debate, Jake Tapper pressed Christie to respond to Trump's immigration plan, but he dodged a direct fight.
Governor Christie, you and I have talked about this in an interview. You say that his big wall, his plan to deport 11 to 12 million undocumented immigrants, it sounds great, but it's never going to happen. Tell him why you're skeptical of his plans.
Well, first off, Jake, I don't yield to anybody on how to enforce the law. I'm the only person on the stage who spent 7 years as the United States Attorney after September 11th. And I know how to do this. The fact is, though, that for 15,000 people a day to be deported every day for 2 years is an undertaking that almost none of us could accomplish given the current levels of funding and the current number of law enforcement officers. But here's what we need to do, and I think this is where Donald is absolutely right. What we need to do is to secure our border.
Later, when Trump and Carly Fiorina started arguing, Christie tried to play the adult in the room, telling them to stop the childish back and forth, but Trump still didn't bite. Not yet, anyways. In the weeks that followed, Christie kept trying to taunt Trump on the campaign trail, questioning his temperament and mocking his over-the-top styles at rallies. But even after all of that, when the third GOP debate rolled around in late October, the two still hadn't clashed. By the fourth debate, however, things got even worse for Christie. His poll numbers had cratered so low that Fox Business bumped him to the undercard debate, leaving Trump to dominate the center stage in primetime. And Trump didn't mention his name once that night. But by November 28th, that changed. The New Hampshire Union Leader, the state's most influential conservative paper, endorsed Chris Christie for president. 2 days later, Trump fired back on Twitter, taking his first real public shot at Christie.
How is Chris Christie running the state of New Jersey, which is deeply troubled when he is spending all of his time in New Hampshire? New Jerseyans not happy.
A week later, Christie returned fire. During a December 7th interview on the Michael Meadow show, he blasted Trump's newly announced travel ban proposal, saying,
"This is the kind of thing that people say when they have no experience and don't know what they're talking about. We should ban Muslims from entering the country is just, to me, someone who's speaking from no experience. You know, there are folks in this race who don't care about what the law says because they're used to just being able to fire people indiscriminately on television. And you do not need to be banning Muslims from the country. That's, in my view, that's a ridiculous position. and one that won't even be productive.
That same evening, Trump answered from the stage of his rally aboard the USS Yorktown in South Carolina.
No, I've been nice to Christie, but he really hit me today. Chris Christie. I mean, I don't know. He's a friend of mine. But he's not doing well in the polls, and he really, really hit me today. He hated this, and yet he said anybody could... You got to look at some of his statements from the past. But he really hit me on the whole thing with we have to stop the Muslims until we find out what's going on. Does that make sense, by the way? Until we find out. And he talked about that's an experience, in other words, he has experience, right? But that's the statement of an inexperienced man. The statement I made about we have to stop people that want to kill us from coming in. Does that sound like inexperience?
Then he unloaded mocking Christie over Bridgegate, New Jersey's 9 credit downgrades, and that famous Obama hug after Hurricane Sandy.
He knew about it. They didn't mention at one of their meetings, I think they had breakfast like every day or every other day. They didn't say, Chris, tonight we're closing up the George Washington Bridge because the mayor of a certain area is against you. Oh, okay. They didn't mention it. Nobody believes that. Number 2. 9 downgrades of the state. 9 downgrades. It's a disaster. I have property over there. The taxes are through, I'll use an expression, coming out of my ears, okay? Tremendous taxes over there. You had 9 downgrades. You had Christie, so friendly with President Obama during the flood. I actually called, I said, let me ask you, is he going to vote for Obama?
For the first time, Trump went on full offense against Christie. It marked the real turning point, the moment their quiet feud became open warfare. In the months that followed, the back and forth kept going. Christie threw a few more jabs on the trail, and Trump fired back with his usual flair. But it didn't matter, Christie's numbers were sinking fast, and Trump was running away with the race. By early February, the writing was on the wall. Christie was out of money, out of momentum, and out of patience. After finishing a humiliating 6th place in New Hampshire, his campaign collapsed. And just days later, in a shocking turnaround, Chris Christie endorsed Donald Trump. He declared,
I am proud to be here to endorse Donald Trump for President of the United States. I'm doing this for a number of reasons. First is that Donald and I, along with Melania and Mary Pat, have been friends for over a decade. He has been a good and loyal friend to our family, as we have been to he and his family. Secondly, I've been on that stage. I've gotten to know all the people on that stage. And there is no one who is better prepared to provide America with the strong leadership that it needs, both at home and around the world, than Donald Trump. So I thank him for his friendship. I thank him for all the kindnesses that we've shared with each other over the years. But more importantly than that, I thank him for leaving the private sector, for seeing that there was a need for strong leadership in this country, and for being willing to step out of the private sector and come and offer himself for public service.
The backlash was brutal. 6 New Jersey newspapers called for Christie's resignation, calling the move opportunism, and I tend to agree. And then came the infamous hostage video. On Super Tuesday, Trump gave his victory speech, and Christie stood frozen behind him, blank-faced staring into the void. The internet exploded with memes. Hashtag Free Chris Christie went viral overnight, and before you feel bad for him, don't forget, Christie was the one who attacked Trump first. Those early jabs, calling Trump an entertainer, mocking his temperament, saying the Muslim ban was ridiculous, Trump didn't forget any of it. He played nice for a while, took the endorsement, put on a smile, but behind the scenes, the revenge was already brewing. And it didn't stay private for long. Just a couple months later, it burst into public view. At a February 2016 Trump rally in Tennessee, the cameras caught a telling moment. Christie had just finished warming up the crowd when Trump leaned in and said off mic,
Thank you, Chris. Wow. Thank you. This is one endorsement, really, that I wanted.
Even after all the humiliation, Christie stayed loyal, simply because he wanted something. He campaigned for Trump, helped shape the platform, and was eventually rewarded with a big title, chairman of the presidential transition team. But it didn't last. Within days of Trump's victory, Christie was tossed aside. The reason? Jared Kushner didn't forget. As we established earlier, in 2005, Christie had sent Jared's father to prison. Now the son had the power, and he used it. Christie undoubtedly wanted power: Attorney General, Secretary of State, anything. Instead, he was tossed aside like a used tissue. And from that point on, Christie went into full RINO revenge mode. By 2017, he was publicly defending Robert Mueller and Russiagate, telling MSDNC,
"So all I'm saying about Mueller, who, by the way, I have great confidence in and have said good things about, and I'm not changing my view on Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller is a good man who I think will try to do the right thing by this investigation."
And when Trump called the Russia probe
It's an elaborate hoax.
in 2019, Christie contradicted him again, saying,
"It wasn't a hoax. I mean, it was not a hoax. I mean, the fact is that there is plenty of information here which necessitates a counterintelligence investigation."
He even bragged about advising Trump privately to stop tweeting about the investigation, advice that, of course, went nowhere. After riding Trump's coattails back into the spotlight, Christie suddenly started acting like he was above it all. And while Trump was busy taking on the swamp, Christie was slowly joining it. By 2020, whatever loyalty Chris Christie still had was hanging by a thread. When the election results started rolling in, he didn't hesitate to side with the media narrative right away. On election night, sitting beside George Stephanopoulos on ABC, he declared,
"Listen, as a talk tonight now, not as a former governor, but as a former U.S. attorney. There's just no basis to make that argument tonight."
No investigation, no curiosity, just another RINO rushing to say, case closed. On January 6th, Christie claimed he scrambled to try to reach Trump, calling Kellyanne Conway anyone who would answer. He was clearly trying to be the hero of this situation. Later, he said, "I was desperate to try and get in touch with them because I felt like what was happening was awful and was going to be a stain on his presidency." That became Christie's emotional excuse to distance himself from MAGA once and for all. From that point on, Chris Christie wasn't just a RINO, he was a RINO determined to become the moral authority of the Republican Party. Now that Christie had firmly separated himself from Trump, it was time to run against him. Again, on June 6, 2023, Christie launched his 2024 presidential campaign with one mission: stop Donald Trump. At his kickoff rally, he warned,
The person I am talking about, who is obsessed with the mirror, who never admits a mistake, who never admits a fault, and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong, but finds every reason to take credit for anything that goes right, is Donald Trump.
And the crowd, mostly the press, the Republican base had already moved on. Everywhere Christie went, Republican voters let him know exactly how they felt. At the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference, he was booed so loudly that he had to shout back,
"You can boo all you want. But here's the thing, our faith teaches us that people have to take responsibility for what they do."
At the Florida Freedom Summit, he got the same treatment and sneered,
What a shock here for Trump. I'm going to fall over dead. Now look, every one of those boos, every one of those catcalls, every one of those yells will not keep it, yes, sure, will not solve one problem we face in this country, will not solve, and will not make this country better. Your anger against the truth is reprehensible.
When a politician starts battling his own audience, you know the end is near. By mid-2023, Christie was calling Trump every name in the book. Liar, coward, dictator, even
Voldemort.
At one debate, he sneered,
"This is an angry, bitter man."
Then in January 2024, he finally admitted,
"You just released an unusual new digital ad, Governor, in which you admit to making what you call a past mistake. Let me play a little clip of that for our audience. Watch this.
When I decided to endorse Donald Trump for president, I did it because he was winning. And I did it because I thought I could make him a better candidate and a better president. Well, I was wrong. I made a mistake."
A week later, he dropped out, vowing,
"As I want to promise you this, I am going to make sure that in no way do I enable Donald Trump to ever be president of the United States again. And that's more important than my own personal ambition."
After Christie's 2024 campaign collapse, he didn't disappear, he just changed studios. While Trump was filling arenas, Christie was filling green rooms. Literally. He hit every mainstream network that would have him: CNN, MSDNC, ABC, lecturing conservatives about truth and decency. The same man who once told Trump supporters he was one of them now wagged his finger at the entire base. In August 2025, for old time's sake, Trump took a shot at Christie on Truth Social, writing,
"For the sake of justice, perhaps we should start looking at that very serious situation again. No one is above the law."
2 months later, Christie finally fired back on ABC This Week, calling Trump's Justice Department a mafia crime boss, a capo regime.
This is no longer, the Department of Justice is no longer the premier prosecuting office in America. What it is now is a capo regime who goes out and executes hits when directed by the Don to do so.
For Trump, it was just another day trolling one of his critics, but for Christie, it was likely the last headline he'd ever get that anyone actually cared to read. For 2 decades, Christie's career had been one long audition for the approval of people who will never vote Republican. Now he's a permanent panelist, not a politician. A Republican in name only in the most literal sense. No office, no constituency, just a microphone. And in the end, that's Chris Christie's story, a man who talked tough, chose the cameras, and mistook media applause for a mandate. The base didn't buy it, the movement moved on, and while Trump kept building a coalition, Christie kept building a resume for television. Do you think Christie will run again in 2028? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.